Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy, a 30-minute weekly show that airs at 8:30 a.m. each Saturday morning on KSFR 101.1 FM, your Santa Fe public radio station. And I'm Paul Gibson, the host of Retake Our Democracy. Today, I'm going to be talking with Gabe Vasquez, Democratic candidate for U.S. Congress in New Mexico District 2, a seat currently held by Yvette Harrell. Last week, I spoke with Enrique Cardial, a progressive independent candidate for New Mexico State House Representative District 19, the international district in Albuquerque. What a refreshing voice. We'll get to another inspiring voice, Gabe Vasquez, in just a minute, but first a couple of announcements. If you're driving around and miss any of today's show or you missed last week's show, you can go to retakeourdemocracy.org, click on Retake on the Radio, and you'll find all our audio video recordings there for all the shows going back years. So you can binge watch our shows all for free. How fun. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that we are conducting the show on stolen Tewa land, and that I want to thank our Tewa neighbors for being such good stewards of the land. We could learn a good deal from them, and we'd better do it soon. In addition to working on the general election, Retake is beginning to focus on the 2023 legislative session with a Zoominar series focusing on key issues we hope will become bills that we will support and on initiatives we will oppose. We launched that series on July 13th with a discussion focused on gun violence prevention with Miranda Viscoli, co-president of New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, and Janae Martinez, a student activist from Albuquerque. It was a really compelling discussion. The people who were on really appreciated it. We discussed what might be possible in the 2023 legislative session by means of meaningful gun violence prevention legislation. And we also talked about the ways you can help. You can view an audio video recording of that discussion at retakeourdemocracy.org. Click on the actions and events in the homepage banner and just scroll down. To get to our recording of the gun violence prevention Zoominar, you'll have to scroll past the info on our next Zoominar, which will be on July 27th, and we'll focus on modernizing the legislature. We will be joined by Representatives Angelica Rubio from Las Cruces and Cristina Ortez from Taos. Activist Rick Ann Brock will also be on. She's from Indivisible Santa Fe, and Kara Lynch, the co-founder of Legislative Momentum. There is a strong movement among a group of 10 Democratic women state House representatives who have been working all summer, actually since the session ended in March. They've been working on developing a whole series of bills that would modernize the legislature. And they're not talking about coats of paint. They're really talking about substantially changing the way in which the legislature functions. And boy, does it need some changes. Among the things they're looking for is paid legislature, so you'll get a different composition of people in the roundhouse. It's not everybody can afford to give up basically their entire lives. It's not just a 6-week job. And to get paid staff for the legislators, paid district staff, so that they have someone who is coordinating with the district, their constituents on a regular basis. And also to extend the legislative session so it's longer. We have a crazy system right now, and that you can submit legislation in any session. It doesn't have to come from the governor in the short session it does. So those kinds of changes are changes that we'll see. And I would add that Roxanne and I view this as probably the most important legislation in the next session, because everything else, every big idea you bring to the session, if you bring it in the current system, it takes forever. And if you bring it in a different system, it's going to be more deliberate, more transparent, and it will lead to much better decisions by our legislators. We'll follow that webinar with one in mid-August on a state public bank, and another in September on public power. In October, we will focus on the Health Security Act. In November, we will focus on hydrogen production. There will be plenty going on this summer and fall, so stay tuned. You can get on our web-based Zoominars at retakeourdemocracy.org and going to the actions and events in the menu bar. The new Zoominar descriptions appear near the top of the page, and you need to register to participate. Okay, let's dive in with Gabe. Hi, Gabe. Welcome.
Hey, Paul. Well, it's so great to be here with you. Thank you for welcoming me on your show, and it's exciting to be able to speak with listeners of KSFR.
Okay. Well, I'd like to let our guests introduce themselves. So how about you telling us how you got involved in activism and politics generally, and how you decided to run to represent New Mexico in Congressional District 2?
Well, thanks for that question, Paul. And, I tell people that it's a little bit of a miracle that I find myself running for Congress, because the history of my family and their struggle to reach the American dream has really culminated with me having this opportunity. But, politics is entrenched in our lives, whether we like it or not. And, I started out as a journalism major and public relations major at New Mexico State University as an editor of the local newspaper. I went on to have a career in journalism before I was the executive director of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Las Cruces. I helped start a successful small business here in Las Cruces. I went to go work for Senator Martin Heinrich as a Southwest Field representative. From there, I worked on child welfare public policy before running for the city council in Las Cruces in 2017. And so this desire to make sure that I was involved in the process of building that American dream, not just for immigrant families, but for everybody in this country, is something that is near and dear to my heart. I believe it's honoring the sacrifices of my family. And so politics is a way for me to influence change. It's a way for me to lead my community, and it's a way to honor those sacrifices of those who came before me. And so I'm very excited. I have had an opportunity to work across this congressional district, from Hobbs to Lordsburg to Sunland Park, now to Albuquerque, for many years. And so I know this district well, intimately, and I know that we can win the seat.
Great. Well, we're pulling for you. We don't need to spend much time on this, but we don't need to discredit your opponent, as she does a pretty good job of doing it herself. But it would be good to contrast your positions and priorities with hers. How would you sum up the differences between your perspectives?
Thank you for that question, Paul. Well, I represent the working class. I represent New Mexicans from all stripes across this district. Yvette Harrell represents big corporations. She represents, special interests. She puts politics and her extreme right-wing views in Washington, and her loyalty is to the former president, not to the people of New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District. Now, when you look at her record, she's clearly too extreme for this district. She's voted against holding price gouging oil companies accountable while New Mexicans are paying record gas prices. She voted against capping insulin costs. She voted against baby formula funding. She's co-sponsored a bill that would ban abortion across the nation with no exceptions for rape or incest or the life of the mother. So, as I mentioned before, as a first-generation American, as somebody who deeply understands and appreciates the American dream and the opportunities that this country has given me, I want to make sure that everybody has the same or better opportunities than my family had. And that means we need to level the playing field for New Mexican families. In Congress, I'll fight for paid family leave, for affordable childcare. I'll make sure that we're supporting our small businesses and not large out-of-state corporations. I will work to reduce the cost of healthcare and allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices to lower costs. I'll make sure that we are keeping Social Security and Medicare solvent for years to come. Vote to raise the minimum wage to $15 per hour. I will be a leader on comprehensive immigration reform, and of course, vote to codify Roe versus Wade into law. Those are things that my opponent will not do.
I'm guessing not, and hopefully she won't have the opportunity to mess with those ideas. Let's say you're elected to the House. I think you pretty much laid this out in your contrast. What would be your priorities? Do you have any thoughts on what would be a first bill that you might want to co-sponsor or sponsor?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that we can look at. And when I get to Congress, obviously being part of a large decision-making body like this is not easy. So we have to build relationships. We have to make sure that we are working not just with Democrats, depending on what this Congress looks like in the future, but that we are reaching across the aisle to make sure that we can pass impactful and effective legislation for New Mexicans. But for me, it really starts with the economy and inflation. I mean, that's at the top of everybody's mind right now, and rightfully so. We need to lower the cost for New Mexicans. While families are paying record gas prices at the pumps, and oil companies and CEOs and Texas shareholders are making record profits, Yvette Harrell, again, has voted against holding them accountable. So when I'm elected, I will support legislation that holds these companies accountable who try to price gouge Americans And I'll also make sure that those large corporations who are continuing to funnel tax dollars overseas, who are making record profits and taking advantage of the rigged economic system that Republicans have set up for many years, that we can start to slowly undo some of those systemic changes that have really created the wealth inequality that we see today. I'll also support legislation that lowers the cost of healthcare and of childcare, because New Mexicans should not have to choose between food and medicine, childcare and rent. But there is one bill I'm excited about, something I've been working on for many years, and that is the MH Dutch Salmon Gila Wild and Scenic Bill. That's something that I've been really passionate about. As you might know, I'm a conservationist and environmentalist, and I have been really passionate about protecting one of the last free-flowing rivers in the Southwest. And so the Gila Wild and Scenic River Act is something that I would really enjoy working with my colleagues, especially in the Senate, including Senator Heinrich and Ben Ray Lujan.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So the next question, Roxanne and I canvassed for Xochitl Torres Small in Roswell in 2018, and I must say the political views we encountered were pretty conservative. Too often, I feel Democrats seeking conservative votes from Republicans try to out-Republican their opponent to draw those voters. But I've always felt that the only way to overcome rural Republican conservatism is to offer a clearly different path, one that places people before profit and delineates how the system and the GOP do not serve their interests. But progressive Democratic policies do. Your campaign seems to be taking this approach. How is your messaging resonating with voters? And of all your platform planks, what is most resonating with voters?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question, because depending on who you ask, some people say I'm too conservative, some people say I'm too progressive. Well, I think that I am absolutely a New Mexico Democrat, and I bring a rich history of experience and a wealth of knowledge working in our urban, in our rural, and our native communities. And I think I only know how to do one thing, and that's to be myself. That is to be the candidate that has been shaped by my experiences in my life. And so we're getting a great response everywhere we go. In fact, we just got endorsed by the Republican mayor of Deming. And that's simply because I showed up and I had a conversation with him. In this campaign, you know, we've traveled from Lordsburg to Hobbs, from Chaparral to Albuquerque. And the message that seems to resonate the most is that, unlike Yvette Harrell, I will work for the people in this district. People are proud when I show up. People are happy that somebody is there to listen, whether they're Republicans or Democrats or independents. I have a history of working in this district in several previous occupations, including for Martin Heinrich, including for the New Mexico Wildlife Federation. And I've built a record of service that people see, whether that's protecting our public lands, whether that's working on improving water systems in our native communities, helping veterans get the transportation access they need to the VA or to other healthcare facilities, or making significant investments in the most low-income communities. In my time on the Las Cruces City Council, I tell people I have a record of success. You know, I show up and I listen first, but I also identify with many of our rural communities. You know, I have spent a lot of time, for example, in the Animas Range, in the Beloncillos, in Otero Mesa, in the Gila Wilderness. These places are home to me. And so when we go into rural communities, when I go into rural communities, I speak humble, and I also speak from a place of experience and understanding that our communities are all different, but we have to listen and we have to find common solutions, and we have to take some of the partisanship, you know, out of the way that we campaign, because truly it is about working together to find solutions for New Mexico. And I think that's why we've been so well received across these rural communities.
Okay, well, it does seem like you've got that down, the pattern in terms of feeling comfortable in rural New Mexico. How much of your messaging is about the importance of maintaining democratic control of this U.S. Congress, or is your campaign pretty much solely focused on issues and your positions?
You know, obviously it's incredibly important that we control, that we keep the House and that we're able to expand the Senate. There's a lot at stake in the upcoming election, and I think that's really, you know, weighing heavy on people's minds. And we need to be focused on 2022. I know folks are already talking about 2024, but 2022 elections could not be more important. And so we're focusing on the immediate issues that really matter to the people in this district. Of course, inflation and improving the economy, lowering the cost for families, improving access to healthcare, making sure that we are taking meaningful action on climate change. Those are the things that I talk about because I think those are most impactful to our communities as we look at record wildfires, as we look at water scarcity and quality issues that we're having across our district. And so mostly we focus on what's happening here, but also we are at such an important inflection point nationally that we really have to realize how important this seat is to the larger picture of what we're able to get done in the next 2 years.
Okay. As a follow-up to that question, you've been talking with voters quite a bit for quite a while now. What are the issues that voters are bringing to you? What's most important to the New Mexico voters, CD2?
Well, as a city councilor, I did just about everything in my position that dealt with people's immediate needs and tried to make the quality of life and try to improve the quality of life better for people. I joked that I even sat in a backyard with a decibel meter because one of the constituents that I had a barking dog problem, and we needed to measure for 10 minutes the decibel levels of the barking dog to make sure that there was in fact a violation of the codes ordinance. And that's the kind of grit that I bring to this campaign, right? Those important issues that matter to people is when they step out of their door or when they have to make critical decisions about whether they buy groceries, whether they go to the local food pantry, they can pay their light bill, they can pay their utility bill, or they can afford to buy a used car or send their kid to school or to summer camp. I mean, that is the majority of people in this district who are facing these issues. And so the economy, of course, inflation and the rising cost of goods, that is what's impacting the majority of New Mexicans in the 2nd Congressional District. And those are issues that I've dealt with as a city councilor. And so Yvette Harrell's record of voting against the interest of her constituents, and that record is a long one. When people learn that Yvette opposes holding these gas companies accountable and their CEOs and their Texas shareholders, when they learn that she's voted against capping the cost of insulin or raising the minimum wage, they recognize that no matter where they are, that she doesn't represent their interests. And so that is the number one issue that I'm hearing from folks is that they truly want somebody who cares, who comes from the working class, and somebody who's not just in Congress to serve special interests or to enrich themselves.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I got to take a quick break here, Gabe. Just to
No problem.
Remind our listeners that KSFR is more important than ever these days in the days of like misinformation on the mainstream media. KSFR offers you straight news based on facts and reality, not false news like you get in the media. And they also have a wide range of discussion programming like this and programs on our culture, our arts, our music, all of this, and it comes to your living room free. But it's not free to them. They need to pay for engineers and they need to pay for a studio. And so they need your help. And so what I would encourage you to do is after you listen to the show today, go to ksfr.org, click on the donate button and give them 10 or 20 or 30 bucks and view it as your ticket for admission to a lot of great programs. And thank you, KSFR, for letting us be on your station. So your campaign has caught, we're going to get back to Gabe now. Your campaign has caught the attention of Democrats at a national level. Why do you suppose this is the case? And how is their attention benefiting your campaign? Has there been any pressure from U.S. Democratic leadership for you to moderate your messaging?
That's a great question. And I think I mentioned to you earlier that I only know how to be myself. I only know how to live off of the lived experiences that I've had, the opportunity to work in local government, to draft state legislation, to influence federal legislation, and to love and listen to this beautiful state of New Mexico. And that's where I operate from. It truly is from the heart. Someone very special to me told me once that when you speak from the heart, you can't go wrong. And that is the approach that I'm taking on this campaign. I think authenticity is the most important thing that people are looking for in a candidate. And so when I show up and I talk to folks in communities, whether it's Hillsborough or Las Cruces or Albuquerque or Truth or Consequences, I speak from the heart and I will answer the hard questions. And so I think that has really made me stand out as a candidate. But of course, having a red to blue designation means that this is one of the few seats that Democrats can take from Republicans in the upcoming midterms. And I know that we've seen the numbers. I know that we've seen some of the scare tactics out there about Democrats losing the House. However, I think that people understand and know how important it is to keep this House seat. And that is why they are taking notice nationally. I also think that I'm an incredibly strong candidate. I think I'm the right candidate for this time and for this seat in this campaign. And so they've seen the success that we've had. They know that our messaging is working with voters because I am from this district and I share the life experiences of voters here. And of course, we're a 56% Hispanic or Latino district, right? And so as a first generation American, as a native Spanish speaker who is fighting for that American dream, I think folks are attracted to a candidate who doesn't come from wealth, who doesn't come from money. And we need more representatives who reflect working families like the ones who call our district home. And I think that's why we're beginning to get a lot of national attention.
Okay. So, you just mentioned that, 56% Latino population or Hispanic population in your district. There have been a lot of polls recently showing that Hispanics are moving more to the GOP. Why do you suppose this is the case, and how are you addressing that in your campaign?
Well, I think for too long, I think we've thought about Hispanic or Latino communities as a monolith, right? As one giant voting block, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I wouldn't want to speak for the issues of the South Valley of Texas or Miami or any other Hispanic region. What I know is that in my district, that Hispanic families and Hispanic communities, we stick together. I think we are all looking for the same things. It's improving the economy. It's lowering the cost of goods. It's helping our families succeed. It's making sure that we can send our kids to summer camp and to Little League. It's to making sure we can afford houses and that we can give our students a good education and good quality education. And so in New Mexico, in this district, I just don't see that, at least in the regions that I've been visiting. I think the Hispanic community here is very rich, whether it's a first generation or a recently immigrated family, or a fifth generation or sixth generation New Mexican Hispanic family. I see that we all have the same needs and the same desire to thrive, both in our rural and our urban communities. And so that may be happening in other districts, but here in New Mexico 2nd District, I think that I am the right Hispanic candidate for a majority Hispanic district.
Okay, I tend to agree with you. Have you had any moments on the campaign trail, and I'm imagining that you have, where you had a hunch going in, the conversation might not end well, but as you talked more, the person warmed to your message, and by the time you were done, you had a converted voter? And if you did have moments like this, can you identify what it might have been the turning point in those conversations where people suddenly got it and got you?
I'm glad you asked this question because just a few days ago, I was at a candidate forum in Albuquerque, and I can tell you it was a majority Republican crowd, and I knew that going into it, but it was still important for me to show up. And I was on stage with only Republican candidates. However, when I answered the questions to the best of my ability, and again, speaking from the heart and what I would do in Congress. And before I left that meeting, I had several people, I can count at least 3, who came up to me and they said, "Hey, I am a Republican, but I'm going to support you, or I'm going to vote for you, or I'm going to tell my family to vote for you." And in fact, we got a donation from one of them. And that was something that was really heartening because I knew that putting people over politics and talking about the message of the welfare of our community and sticking together and being there for each other was a message that really resonated even with Republicans. And so I speak with voters across our district of all parties. I was just in Hillsborough not too long ago and 50 people showed up, of course, in a rural part of our community. And I received overwhelmingly positive response. And the truth is that we all want to leave a better place for the next generation. We all want to have better opportunities and have an opportunity to talk to the person that is leading them in Congress and know that that's a real person, somebody who's struggled like they have. And so that's what I'll do in Congress. I'll listen to everyone. I'll put people first. And I think people recognize that.
Okay, so the redistricting process did you a little bit of a favor. How has redistricting reshaped the CD2 district boundaries and your chances of being elected?
Well, listen, I launched my campaign in September of last year before I knew what the district looked like or what the map would look like. The one thing that I knew I wanted to do was to run for this seat. That I knew that we needed better leadership in this district, and I knew that it was my time to step up, right? I had the experience, I had the opportunity, and I needed to seize that opportunity. And so I had no idea what the maps would look like, but we needed a better representative in Congress. And so, of course, we do have a different district now. And if the district hadn't changed, I'd still be talking about the same issues. I would still be running the same campaign. and talking about what New Mexicans really need. And so we do have a better district. That is one of the reasons, obviously, that we are drawing national attention. But I had no control of that. I ran months in advance of that. But I certainly do have an opportunity here to win that perhaps Democrats haven't had in the past.
Okay, I think that that's probably the case. You moved up into some parts of Albuquerque too, which is one of our strongholds here for Retake Our Democracy. I imagine you've got canvassing going there. Can you tell us a little bit about this? We're almost out of time for the radio show. So after you tell us about the canvassing in Albuquerque, if you can tell us a little bit about how people can get more information on your campaign, and then we'll continue the conversation for YouTube.
Absolutely. So, we have amazing volunteers who are in Albuquerque. We just hired 2 new organizers who are taking, reign of this campaign, who are talking with voters. And if people want to help our campaign, they can go to our website, gabeforcongress.com. They can click on the volunteer link. They can sign up and be one of our incredible organizers who can help us win this seat back. Of course, we would love to have the financial support of folks as well. But yes, Albuquerque is critical and incredibly important. And I've spent a lot of time in the South Valley talking with voters, talking with folks to make sure that they know that I represent the values of the South Valley, which are very similar to the South Valley of Doña Ana County. But I'm not taking anything for granted. And I'm making sure that we build trust, that we build relationships, and that we build touch points with people in the beautiful city of Albuquerque in the South Valley and on the west side.
So we're about out of time, and so we're going to have to end the show. And but listeners, if you're interested in what Gabe's telling us, he's going to be talking with me for a bit longer on the YouTube station. You can get that by going to retakeourdemocracy.org and clicking on Retake on the Radio. And this will be posted before you hear this, actually, on the radio, because we're going to post it right away. We're recording a week and a half before the show. But thank you very much for being with us today, Gabe. And good luck with your campaign. And we'll be back in just a few seconds to continue this conversation.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, we're back on YouTube. And I've seen reports that CD2 is now 51-49 Democrat. If this is even close to true, I'm guessing your campaign is focused on getting Democratic voters rather than trying to convert GOP voters. Is that the case?
Well, I think it's all about motivation, Paul. I think we may have some better numbers now, but we do have to motivate both Democrats and independents, especially to vote, and certainly some Republicans that I think that we can also get out to vote. And so I think it's incredibly important that folks aren't just voting against Yvette Herrell, but they're voting for Gabe Vasquez, that they're voting for a positive message, that they're voting for vision, that they are voting for somebody who's going to do something in Congress rather than just gum up the wheels as we've seen Republicans do so often. And so when people hear what my priorities are and the extreme agenda that Yvette Herrell continues to push, they know that it's important that we vote for a change in leadership in November. So Democrats, independents, Republicans are all supporting our campaign. I'm excited, they're excited to vote in the midterms, but certainly we have to make sure that our Democrats, our Latino community especially, gets out to vote. And so we will certainly be talking to Democrats all across this district, understanding the issues that are important to them and making sure that they get out to the polls, because we truly do need to make sure that we energize the Democratic base in these upcoming midterms.
Have you seen any polling to suggest where you stand so far in the race?
We haven't seen any polling yet, but what we have seen, and this is all anecdotal, and this is, part of the story that I just told you about how Republicans are coming up to me and saying, hey, I'm a lifelong Republican, but I love what you had to say and I love what you stand for, and I'm going to vote for you, or I'm going to support you. I think people are just tired of politicians who are just putting themselves in their party politics first, who are loyal to a past president, or who continue to be loyal to special interests and corporate interests. And so that's what I'm hearing on the road, is that Yvette Herrell is not showing up, that Yvette Herrell doesn't care for the things that New Mexicans are asking for. And that they're so glad that somebody's actually showing up to listen to the people of this district and to fight for them. So an informal, or maybe a straw poll that I could tell you about, is that so far people are just happy that they have somebody that cares, that's running for this district.
You were a Las Cruces city councilor and have credible CD2 roots, as you've described, but Las Cruces is hardly rural, and much of CD2 is. How different are urban and rural voters, and do you feel that voters tend to want the same things? Urban and rural voters.
That's a great question, and I think the answer is yes. However, New Mexico has largely been an agricultural community and state for many years, and so the issues that are very important to rural communities, things like water infrastructure, things like community and senior centers, things like infrastructure that is adequate for economic development, like broadband access. Those are things that are unique in many ways to rural communities. I worked for years with Martin Heinrich to bring results to rural communities, including a promise zone application for Southwest counties of New Mexico that came in second place. We nearly got millions of dollars of investment working with the Southwest Council of Governments on that. Of course, renewable energy jobs and the promise that those bring to rural communities in transmission and battery storage and capacity. Those are incredibly important. And passing on these rural ways of life, right? The generational passing on of things that is incredibly important for our rural communities. Those are things that are unique to rural communities. And I mentioned before, I'm an outdoorsman, so I spend a lot of time in the mountains and in the forest and in our deserts, kayaking and fishing and hunting and doing these things. And so I know how important the rural lifestyle and the rural way of life is. And so in that sense, of course, New Mexico is a little bit different, but we all want the same things for our kids. We all want the same things for our communities. The ability to keep the lights on, the ability to pass on our traditions, the ability to have a better future or the future that our kids want for themselves in the next generation. And so that's what we're talking about when we're in communities, and it resonates, I think, with everybody.
Okay. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yes, absolutely. So I just want listeners to please visit our website, gabeforcongress.com, to join us as a volunteer, to make a donation to our campaign if you can. This is just such a critically important time in our state's history. New Mexico's 2nd district has historically been a Republican district. We've only had 2 Democrats in the last 50 years, and we have a unique opportunity in 2022, not just to win this district, but to keep this district. And that is very, very important, because if I get the opportunity to serve with Representative Ledger Fernandez and Representative Stansbury, both who have endorsed our campaign, we can do some pretty amazing things together. And we can as well with Senator Heinrich and Senator Ben Ray Lujan. And so now is not the time to sit this one out. Now is not the time to think about 2024. Now is the time to think about 2022 and seize on this opportunity that we have to win this district back, to keep this district, and to make sure that those New Mexico values that I've been talking about are embodied from Lordsburg to Hobbs, from the west side of Albuquerque to Sunland Park. We can make this happen, but I need your help. So that's all I got. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, well, I actually have another question that
Okay.
I just thought of, and that is, because what you were saying is this 2022 election is so important, and for Retake, our focus is really on the state legislature, and so for us, we've been interviewing people from on public power, on public bank, on health security, and on all of those things. And the one thing they all tell me is that if Michelle loses, all bets are off for anything progressive or even reasonably democratic getting through the legislature. And so that is also a critically important race. Are you hearing anything on the campaign trail that suggests that her campaign is resonating, or is that not something that is on your bandwidth?
Yeah, I haven't really spoken with voters about the governorship on our campaign. I have focused clearly on New Mexico's 2nd district and the work that we have ahead of us. However, I can say that, yes, we absolutely need to make sure that we keep the Democratic governorship in New Mexico, because we are a shining light, I believe, amongst states that are more conservative, where we are now a haven for women's reproductive health care, where we're enforcing and enacting some of the strictest methane release laws in the country. We're making progress on early childhood education. That can only happen, of course, when we have a Democratic administration. And so it's incredibly important that we keep that, because if I get elected to Congress, I expect to be working with a state legislature and with a Democratic governor to get things done, to bring dollars and results to New Mexico. So her success obviously is tied to being able to get things done as a whole, as a state, over the next 2 years. And so I sincerely hope that that she's doing extremely well across the state, and I think she is, because the alternative obviously is not something that I don't think New Mexicans want to see.
Right, right. Doesn't know where the wind blows. He's a weatherman. Anyway, I want to thank you very much, Gabe. This has been a delightful conversation. I do these shows every week, and I've done them for 6 years now. And I must say that in terms of someone who can just speak from the heart without notes, you do that so clearly. I can understand how your message resonates with voters. And I want to wish you good luck in your campaign. And I want to encourage listeners to get out and go to gabeforcongress.com.
Yes,
And it's FOR, not the number 4.
that's right.
And so, and send them some money, but also get out and canvass, because that's what they need, is have people, human beings talking to human beings. That works very
That's right.
well. Okay, well, thank you very much, Gabe. I appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.